All right, there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, a man that does not need any introduction in our community, but I'm going to tell you who he is anyways because it is my pleasure and my privilege. This is Clif. Hi, you guys. I've been a fan of Clif since I was 19 years old. While my friends were obsessed with the Jonas Brothers, I was obsessed with halfpasthuman.com. And I caught a lot of flack for it because nobody knew what the heck I was going on about. And now fast forward many thousands of years later, because I am officially ancient, I get to speak with somebody that I looked up to since I was just a kid. So Clif, thank you so much for giving me the time. I'm really excited to pick your brain today. I have some specific questions from my Patreon subscribers that were very happy to take advantage. I don't have too many. I think I only have 2 or 3 that I really want to get to. And then I have some questions that I would like to ask you of paramount interest to me. But let us know how you've been. How are things in your neck of the woods?
I've been getting better and better physically, and my environment has been going to hell. We've had power outages. That's probably what resulted in the crash of the smart controller for my heating system out here. So it's very cold. But it's the environment we're in. It's no big deal. Like the Swedes say, there's no such thing as inclement weather, merely inadequate clothing. so anyway, though, we're doing good out here, just abiding.
I hear you. I hear you. And already we're having some internet issues. This is something that is, it seems to only happen, or at least it happens really intensely when I talk to Clif. The last time I spoke to you, we've had 2 other videos that I've gotten to do with you. At one point, my laptop lost sound, like my microphone just blew maybe 5 minutes before the interview, and I was never able to reestablish the audio on that laptop ever. And then, the second time we spoke, that was one of the most successful videos that I've ever done. And I learned so much, and I still get people reaching out about that interview that was about the Nummo people. And it was just fascinating stuff. So I want to get into it here. You have graced all of us with so much data and content, and it has been the basis for wonderful conversations, and in a lot of cases, very controversial conversations. A lot of people don't know what to do with your information, Clif. They don't know. They just have no idea what to make of it. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? So without further ado, I want to get into a couple specific questions. So because there has been so much data that we have sifted through, you may or may not recall these things. So I'm going to try to refresh your memory because there's just been so much over the years. But I have a close client. I also consider him a friend. And, he was like, Jenny, I don't know if you could ask this question on the air or if you just need to get him kind of behind the scenes. But this is in reference to your data. This isn't a personal question. Okay. But at some point, you made reference to, now bear with me. Apparently at some point you made reference to the foreskin of a penis being instrumental to the ability to pilot what we'll call a ship.
Right. Well, it's more broad than that. It's the mind-to-machine interface itself, which apparently can be plugged into the ships or could run a power plant.
I understand. I really do understand that. This question, it kind of implies why and I don't want to call them the Jews because talk about broad, but a certain clan, a certain tribe that has sort of isolated themselves, alienated themselves, for lack of a better term, to be the enemies of humanity, the enemies of the future of humanity. Some would say that this is why they wanted to circumcise or sort of push the agenda for circumcision for everybody else except for them. And so the question really is, can stem cells be beneficial in helping to repair that foreskin and sort of, create a more intact system that would then contribute to the ability to pilot these ships? So that's the question. He did have to convince me to ask you that. That wasn't
right.
easy.
First off, we can eliminate that right off the bat. There is no recovery. Okay. Once the skin is gone, there's 2 to 5 million cells that are gone that are neurine. They are attached to nerves. And so those cells will not be able to be recovered. You could have stem cells, but you don't have the template there for those stem cells to replicate, right? So stem cells won't build new tissue. So you could not build a new finger from stem cells without the old finger there to replace it cell by cell by cell, using the old finger as a template. So once the foreskin is gone, that is gone. Now, here's something that we have to consider, though. So we're doing this, a bunch of old farts and myself are doing this with really old language, and we're using AI. And some of these are really old variants or precursors for Sanskrit. So we have a lot of potential for errors. So we're assuming from the language we've got that it's one way, but it really could be the other way because we don't know where the negation factor is in that language. So in other words, it could be that if the foreskin is cut off, you can't get into these mind-machine interfaces, or it could be the other way, that they have to have the foreskin cut off in order for you to be able to control these machines. So I'm reading it one way, that the intact individual was what they were after. But that doesn't really make sense in the broader scheme of things in the evolution of humanity, because you would think that the push for circumcision would have had a more positive benefit for the people that are doing the push. So in other words, the L were here to find people as slaves to run these machines. So if circumcision prevented them from operating the machines, why would they insist on circumcising all these people? Okay, there's one of my guys and myself, we think we're reading it correctly where it's an intact male is required, right? But it could be that you have to be snipped in order for this machine interface to work. The language is so old that we just don't have a definitive answer on this. We're looking for other things that may confirm it one way or another. So at this stage, I wouldn't be too concerned about it, but there's also this other aspect. The nature of humans in the Kali Yuga is different from humans now, even though our DNA is the same. Okay, so it may be that the circumcision aspect of this was pertinent in the Kali Yuga, but it might not be now, because we're different critters with all these different energies coming in, right? And it is truly a mind-to-machine interface, and it was the language suggests that there is a component to intact nerves at the periphery of the body, hands, feet, and penis, that allow this device to work. But again, we're using very old precursors to Sanskrit, and we have some pretty solid definitive translations on these things, but we have to put in a lot of inference, because the people that were writing about it at that time were writing about it with a religious perspective and not a mechanistic one. So we lose something in translation. So at this point, it's kind of a toss-up as to which way it actually goes, right? It may be that they need you circumcised in order to run the machines. Just we can't say definitively.
I understand.
But in either case, stem cells won't help.
Okay, so that's the key, the kicker right there, is that stem cells can't essentially create new tissue where there is nothing, no tissue to recreate. Okay. All right, so I think that really answers that. Please forgive me for jumping around a little bit. I think you can keep up.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so my next question from a dear client and friend: how would you scale in comparison to what's coming, what the data is predicting? How would you scale the 1929 stock market crash as far as the emotional release, what everything that happened back then. I don't know if you go back in time and compare, like sort of.
That's how I actually started the definition of all the words relative to my system, was finding elements such as the crash in 1930, getting the language from that, knowing the level of emotionalism, and then what it led to. I could start placing values. Okay, so I think I understand. They want to know where we are in a relative perspective, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the 1930s crash was not unexpected even then, and it was a part of an ongoing process that had begun with World War I. Okay, the fall of the German mark, the paper mark arising, the Weimar Republic paper mark hyperinflation were also part of the process of the economics that led us to the crash in 1930s. And in between the Weimar and the crash in the 1930s was the introduction of the petroleum society. Okay, so petroleum is not a fossil fuel. There's no dinosaur ever made into oil. None of that. Okay, petroleum is the second most abundant material inside the planet beyond water, and both are created inside the planet. Okay, and so so there were conditions that had to arise in the 1930s, and we see that Rockefeller started creating those conditions in 1921, 22, and 23 as the Reichsmark was going down. Okay, so in that sense, the 1930s crash was a global event, rippled around the whole planet, but it took like 12 or 15 years to really work its way around the whole planet. And the 1930s crash was slow moving and relatively isolated. So it went from place to place to place, leaving behind people that were already trying to figure out what had happened and how to recover, right? So by the time we saw crashing of currencies and so forth in Eastern Europe, people in the West, out here in the West Coast, were already starting to make wooden nickels to try and cope with the circumstances that we found ourselves in. We won't have that aspect of it this time. So in my viewpoint, because of global communications, the release language will be so much more huge, and it'll happen pretty much globally all at once, right? Unlike the 1930s crash.
That sums it up. I think that answers the question, and that's kind of what I was expecting, just based on our technological advances and the fact that as a civilization we have graduated to the World Wide Web. We can now communicate with each other instantaneously, no matter where we are. So fascinating.
Another factor for that too, though, is exactly that, is cryptocurrencies. So as we are having the emotional release here of the crash within the language of the social media and so on, there's going to be an economic component to this that will also hit us viscerally, because we'll see the cryptocurrencies go shoot through the roof as the fiat is dying. And so you'll have people that will be, new instant millionaires arising in the village next to you in the Czech Republic, right? And these kind of things will be happening all around the planet simultaneous to the destruction of the fiat currencies. So you'll know at a level that will be ever so much more real to you, because, hey, cousin Tom, he just got millions of dollars here. What's going on, right? So it'll be very interesting to see it play out.
Fascinating stuff. I knew this was going to be fun. So you saw me have a bit of a reaction earlier when you mentioned petroleum inside the water. So about a year ago, I was inundated. You guys know I'm a reader. I'm an intuitive. That's my job. But I was inundated with messages from my higher self, from spirit, whatever the heck you want to call it, that things were going to the waters above our head, as well as the waters beneath our feet, were going to be affecting the human body, the human collective, in such a way that was going to be inignorable. And also that the earth, the water on the surface of the earth, the water in the atmosphere was going to start behaving in ways that really bent and challenged our perception of what water is supposed to do. It's like, well, I've never seen water behave that way. And I have used my platform to bring people over to a website that they don't even know I exist. Okay. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I just love the work that they're doing. And that is the primarywaters.org. And they're actually, I think, based out in California. They do a lot of work out on the West Coast. But this is essentially, this campaign is based on the idea, and this is not theoretical. This is a known, this is geophysics, geochemistry, the fact that the water is producing earth. And some of these brilliant minds, they call these waters the waters that have not been born yet. And why this appears to be such a pressing issue and something that's going, I hope, to be injected into the conversation is because the bad guys, we'll call them, are very much planning to monopolize water by creating a shortage, which doesn't shock me at all. Yeah. But the idea is that if we had the technology, if we were able to, apparently it is a relatively inexpensive technology in comparison to something like a desalination plant, which is astronomically expensive and also not even that, effective. Right. We would be able to, there would be no shortage. The idea of a water shortage when we live on a planet that is creating water and will always create water is asinine. And so I'd like to ask you, does the data reflect anything pertaining to the sort of the resurgence or the coming to the surface, if you will, linguistically and emotionally, our understanding of those waters and the implications of them in our society?
I don't know about us guys, okay? I mean, in the West, but right now, and perhaps maybe for the last, I've been aware of it for maybe 11 months or so. The Ruskies are, the Russians do the super deep wells for petroleum, right? Inexhaustible wells for petroleum. They're aiming to do that for primary water. Oh. All right. So they're going to do, so they're doing, it's in conjunction with this Arctic gas initiative. Okay. There's so much natural gas in the Arctic that the Russians estimate that at a population, this was a Russian scientist, I can give you his name and stuff. He's not connected to officialdom. He's connected with their petroleum industry. And he estimates that if we had a population on the planet right now that was 4 times our, so if we had 28 billion people on this planet, there's over 2,000 years of natural gas in the Arctic for those 28 billion people. Okay, so it would grow us for hundreds of years as a social order. Anyway, so they're in the process of doing their deep natural gas drills. Some aspect of it got diverted over to the primary water. The Russians are great people. I love them. Po-Ruski yazyka. I read and I don't speak it very well, but I do read Russian. And the Russians have this interest in the spiritual side of matter that does not show up in the Jewish-dominated Einsteinian world of the West, okay, which it's all grit. And this is what really ticks me off, is their idea is if you squish enough grit together, you'll get consciousness. And it doesn't work that way, right? So the Russians are interested in primal water because of the nature of our bodies and the potential that that primal water could have an effect on us in a way that ordinary surface water does not. Okay, surface water being denatured, so to speak, as opposed to the primal water. And so there is an initiative. I don't know how long or how far it is along. I don't know if they're actually even drilling for the water yet. I know that I was reading stuff that was like planning documents, right? Like stuff that had leaked out in corporations and so on. But it is going ahead. They put money behind it. It's one of these strange health initiatives like the shungite. Okay, so in Russia, you'll find whole stores that are just devoted to shungite. And it's this little mineral here. I wear it as a medallion. I don't know if we can see it there. I've got a little American flag on mine.
That's nice.
Anyway, it prevents electromagnetic fields. If you put it between your body and any kind of an electromagnetic field, it sucks in the EMF and prevents that stuff from getting to you. So right now there's an electromagnetic field out by the screen that's around a 57. And it's less than 2 getting beyond the shungite here, okay? They also put shungite in water, and I do that as well. I've got a bunch of rough shungite stones that I've got in my water filter. And my dogs will not drink filtered water that doesn't have it be filtered through the shungite anymore. I mean, they just won't touch it. I can put 2 bowls down there. I can put they don't like the city water anyway with all of the chemicals in it. Right. But they know that the shungite adds something to it. And the Russians are also of this under this impression. And if you look in Russian literature, they've got longevity studies on people that are up in the Karelian area. And that's something else as well. But that are living longer because these people drink water that is basically being filtered in the ground through shungite where the meteor hit, and then they also filter it with shungite in their local or in their crocs and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're living about 11 to 18% longer than ordinary Russians that don't have access to the shungite, who may be close enough that they're sort of actually getting it through the ground. So the Russians will be the lead in the water thing. It'll come to us, but we've got a lot of other crap that's going to be occupying our mind for the next few years before we really get into this. Now, one little bit to divert, though. All shungite comes from a single meteor strike in northern Russia, right? And it is in a place that phonetically, probably is doing this very badly, Kar-El. Okay, so it's the Elohim again.
There they are.
Okay, so here's the thing. The reason that the Karelian in the Karelian region in Russia got struck by that meteorite is said to be by literature that is old and Russian and Chinese. That was part of the attack on Earth. There were 3 meteorites, one, and they're not in the same time period, but there were 3 meteorites that have been, or 3 meteors that have been talked about in literature as being part of an attack. And the Karelian one was very definitely spoken of in this literature as being part of the attack when humans were conquered. So again, that's why the L in the name. Everything that was attached to the Elohim, it's all connected.
Well, it's fascinating, and it makes a lot of sense when you consider the demonization of Russia and the Russian people in the past, however many years. And a lot of people are very familiar with a man named Edgar Cayce. And he was a devout Christian. He also happened to be a talented medical medium. We could call him, although I do believe that term has been coined by someone recently, who calls himself the medical medium, but Edgar Cayce is the OG. And he quoted, I'm quoting him here, "From Russia will come the light of the world." And he was talking about this time period that we were in, I believe. And it makes a lot of sense, especially when you consider some of the more popular Russian literature that has circulated its way across the planet, such as The Ringing Cedars, the story of Anastasia. And so she's the one, that is fabulous stuff, highly recommend it. Part of her teachings is this reestablishment of human beings and our symbiotic connection to the natural world, so much so that she talked about taking a seed and putting it beneath the tongue and allowing for the DNA exchange to take place, where now that seed would grow and the fruit that it produced would essentially have been created to target specific ailments within that person's DNA. Very similar to the idea of a mother who's breastfeeding her child, her infant, the saliva, all of the DNA mixing. Now that child, through the saliva, is sending the mother's body signals, allowing her to create the breast milk, the antibodies that are targeting exactly what that child needs. And so the argument here is that we have the same relationship or a comparable relationship with Mother Earth as the infant and the mother. And so, I believe it did inspire an entire movement called Anastasianism. Anastasianism, I believe that's it. And so there's entire communities of people across the world that live in accordance with those teachings. And it just makes a lot of sense that we here in the Western world would have to endure this trial by fire period, if you will, where we are essentially under a kind of dome of punishment, where we kind of have to.
It's not kind of, it's literal, the chemtrails. All of these things are intended to separate you from that natural bioelectromechanical or bioelectrical alignment. So you're quite correct. It's I don't think of it as a punishment. I think of it as the controller's desire to keep us separated and make us into mechanistic, right, as opposed to flowing with like a spiritual aspect of things, right? But you're quite correct. So the Russians, by the way, will probably be the entree for a lot more real history. They are actually doing that now, putting out stuff about Tartaria and all of these kind of things, and they're there for all of the support. You can go to Yandex and get a lot more information about anything than from any of the Western search engines. And I think that that statement will end up being accurate, that Casey made, that, you know, they will be the light of the world, because they've retained a lot of this information. And they've rebuilt themselves since they threw off our common enemy, the globalist elite, and they threw them off at the end of the Soviet, the end of the Soviet Empire and the Russian Revolution then, right? And they had, okay, so it's curious. We had a revolution here in 1776 that was violent and explosive and growing. Probably there was like Astro that would confirm that. When the Russians had their revolution against the Soviets, it was the other end of the cycle. Their economy was dying, everything. And so the Russians they didn't have to go through the violence aspect of it, but they were, and thus they were able to grow out of it without that period of time of extra destruction. I think we'll actually get to that as well. Okay, so I think our society is going to die the same way the Soviet society did. Not by violence, not by huge amounts of destruction, which is what the controllers want, which is what the globalists want with all their talks of nukes and nuking Gaza and all of this kind of stuff. They want that violence. They need it as part of the mind control thing. And in my opinion, what's going to happen is it's going to be a walkaway. That in the first few months of next year, the implosion of the fiat system globally will have most of us simply walking away from jobs and roles within officialdom. There'll still be carpenters, there'll still be people working at stores, that kind of thing. But a lot of people are just going to desert working for government and go seek some other way of living. And it'll have to do with the degradation of the money, but also the complete degradation of confidence in the system that we now have. So we are actually laboring under something that we think of as natural, sort of your dome of punishment. It's a punishment to us, not just the chemtrails, but this mental attitude that what Obama and officialdom might say is somehow more valid, more true than something you and I might say. Yet everything that officialdom says, we can sit down here from our viewpoint and poke holes in it and say, all of this stuff you're saying is invalid. Why is it that we allow ourselves to live in a society where our rulers are putting out horse shit that is clearly horse shit? We can point to it, we can smell it, we know it's horse shit, we know it's not true, and yet they are our rulers of our society, they are the controllers of our society, and they're obviously not aligned with any of the goals of any of the people of the society. And so we find ourselves truly in a war now with what would be slave masters. So, we now have to as Jimi Hendrix said, we have to stop talking falsely to each other, okay, in order that we may proceed. And as of hyper novelty appearing early next year, and I think most of us woo guys will feel it really viscerally by about April 3rd, the first week in April. But it might take until June or so before a lot of the normies start actually encountering it and dealing with it. But we'll start talking factually to each other. And so it's difficult because we've been set up. So the language has been used against us to the point where those things I would want to say to those people that most need to hear it, they would not hear it because the words have been tainted and polluted before I even express them, okay?
Right. Yes.
And the tainting and the polluting of those words puts on my words and thus on me a level of emotionalism that is not mine. So I can say things and people will point fingers and say, you're an anti-Semite. Now, they're wrong because I have nothing against the Semitic people.
Mm-hmm.
They're wrong because Jews are not Semitic in the main. You know, there's 4 major categories of Jews and one minor one. The one minor one is 2% or less of the categories of Jews. And the minor one is the only one that has genetic lineage that connects to the Gaza and Middle Eastern ground. Okay, those are the Judean Jews. Everybody else is some form of an Ashkenazi. And they originate from the middle of Europe. They have no genetic, no lineage connection to Israel at all. And so this is factual, but I am an anti-Semite for saying that the Jews are not Semitic people. That's how tainted our language is, okay? But now we have to be really factual about things with each other because we're coming into a period of time where all religions that are based on the Jewish myths will crumble. This includes Christianity. This also includes Islam, okay? Because Islam is indeed based on Judaism because Islam was delivered to Muhammad by the Archangel Michael, okay? And Archangel Michael was one of the Elohim. He was one of the last ones that remained on this planet. And he delivered the Quran to Muhammad, and at that time set the Muslims also on the same path as the Elohim had set both Christianity and Judaism. And that's going to be hugely questioned in these next few months as the space alien issue erupts all around the planet around us, okay? And people will have to face the idea that what they have been sold as scriptures, as divine interpretations, divine writing, and all of this is nothing more than a complex plot to convert the minds of humans by the El. Now, I'm not of the opinion that all the space aliens that came down here were Elohim. It is my opinion that the Elohim were a small breakaway group and that the others left perhaps centuries before the Elohim, and that there was fighting between the Elohim and the others. These others we would call like the Devas or the Theoi or other names for a pantheon of gods. But in any event, though, we're about to be, starting next year, we're going to start really getting into contact, okay? We may not actually have face-to-face at that point, but it will be face-to-face in the sense that it will be affecting our minds. And we'll actually have to discuss it in a reality kind of a based look at it. And the instant you do that, all religions become suspect. Okay, so the instant we acknowledge that space aliens exist, then all religions basically fall away because every single one of the religions goes back to UFOs and space aliens. There's only 2 religions that are honest about it, Buddhism and Shinto. Both of them acknowledge space aliens coming down and affecting the lineage of that religion. And say, UFO, unknown flying object, and this being came on out and it affected the enlightenment of Gautama. And Gautama wrote about it. So, you know, this is just kind of ignored by officialdom.
Right.
But nonetheless, that's the way it is with all of our religions. They have, in my opinion, they've come here and usurped the idea that they were the creator gods. And so, you know, it's like us dealing with chickens. If chickens were semi-sentient, we could say, hey, chickens, we created you. And the chickens would be quite happy to think that they were in the presence of their God. They wouldn't know. And that's how humans have been, right?
It's fascinating, and it seems now, in light of everything that's happening, it seems like it should have been obvious this whole time that that was the heist, if you will, as far as scripture goes. And it just kind of dawned on me, like within the last couple months, I'm like, oh my God, like no wonder scripture really never stuck with me. I happen to be a lover of Jesus Christ. I think he's great. Nothing against J-Man whatsoever. But, the Christian worldview and the sort of, modern Christianity, or specifically Western Christianity, really just never, it never stuck with me. It always resonated as being a bit of a setup. And now it makes sense as to why this would be like the most circulated text in history, because what they were essentially doing was controlling our minds, utilizing the powerful force that is human thought and human manifestation through speech, through thought, through action, into creating their version of the apocalypse or their version of Revelation. And so here we stand kind of at the precipice, the beginning and the end of everything. And people are scratching their heads like, oh my God, has it all been a lie? And the truth is that it has been a lie. Yes, it has been a lie. But on the other side of that, I think, the truth is far more liberating and illuminating and exciting than these false sort of half truths that we've been fed this whole time. And so I am optimistic. This next year, I believe February 9th or 10th of 2024 will be the official transition from the 2023 year of the fire rabbit into the year of the wood dragon. And something that I was pointing out to some of my subscribers was the idea that, in 2023, we witnessed a lot of directed energy weaponry, weapon warfare, and similar, in alignment with how the rabbit as a prey animal, it relies on its speed, its quick-wittedness, its ability to procreate very quickly by, having a lot of babies. It all kind of stuck us within this behavior of survival. In order to survive, you flee. In order to survive, the weaponry on the surface, you have to go underground. So there was a lot of this sort of, trial by fire. You have to run, you have to escape, you have to be quick. And if you acted like that in 2023, chances are you did pretty well. Case in point, Lahaina. It was the people that did not obey that survived. It was the people that found their way. They were quick. They didn't listen to officials. They said, no, we know that death is coming. We can feel it. And they ran, and they're the only ones that survived. Now we're looking at something completely different in 2024, because as you know, the dragon is not a prey animal at all. It's a sophisticated, intelligent predator, and it undulates through the sky. And so I anticipate a lot of sky events. I anticipate a lot of transformative events that humans bear witness to, and through bearing witness, that changes us, that changes ourselves, that seeing is believing, right? So I'd be interested to know your thoughts on how the year of the wood dragon, if that comes up at all in the data over the next year, sort of as far as
if you look at it, it does in the sense of the UFOs. Okay, so we have our dragon myths not because dragons ever existed. Okay, there's never been a fire-breathing reptile that flew through the sky here on Earth. All right, but there have been the Rauch, okay, the fire-breathing spaceships of all the aliens that came down. We get the word dragon directly from that through Sanskrit. Okay, if you go back far enough in the precursors, I think it's called Avesta of Sanskrit, there's a description of what is in essence a rocket ship and the effects of this, and from those descriptions we get the word dragon. So the dragon relates directly to the people who came from the sky. All right, it was their mode of transportation, and you notice we always see the gods riding the dragons. Okay, and in all the Chinese myths and everything, the dragon is terrible, fierce, and so on, but he's always subservient to the gods. He guards their treasures. He transports them through the sky, and so in that essence, or in that description, the Chinese captured the essence of it to say that this is a device, a tool of these beings. And so we're going to have, in my opinion, we're going to be encountering that again as we go forward. We're in a very difficult time. There's going to be a lot of people that will die through this time because of inattention and happenstance and karma. And it will be extremely dramatic in ways that the silent death of the people that took the shots has not been dramatic, okay? That's probably a couple of years out before we get into this really nasty period. But this next year is going to be a trial by fire,
yes.
Okay? In a way that 2023 has not been. We've had direct energy weapons. We've had examples of fire from the air. We may this year get examples of water from the air. So now it is, all right, so it is known that you can't operate the moon and beings up on the moon without a source of water, and they're coming down here to get it. Okay, so spaceships come down here and they take water out of, fresh water out of lakes and so on. There's also a lot of suggestions that the activity is really concentrated in the South Pole in Antarctica now for water retrieval. But there's some other things here. We have a tainted history that we can't assume anything. You know, we might have all been here, brought here by amnesia and just put in this planet and that had already had a previous society in existence, okay? But there are these things about mud flood, and there's something very curious about those. And so we found in our old fart works, going way back, a lot of Chinese about it, the idea of a water bomb, okay? The idea that you could have a ship, probably, a mind-to-machine interface device that would change the gravity around a clump of water and also the mud that supports it, would lift up that amount of water, transport it somewhere, and use it as a weapon, okay? And so that would be a weapon that would be different than any kind of storm. It would even be different than the tornado that destroyed Max Egan's house. That was a dry hurricane. The Otis was a hurricane that had no rain on Acapulco, okay? Very unusual, right? So it was just winds. But we also have descriptions of these others where places that were in the middle of Eurasia, okay, so like in the steppes of Russia, north of there's descriptions of mud from nowhere falling out of the sky and obliterating huge areas, okay? A lot of the areas that they obliterated were Tartarian and had Tartarian architecture. Okay, right. And we find this as we dig down. You'll find buildings under the buildings in New York, that kind of thing, right? But here's something really curious about this. There's a lot that's really curious about this, but no Tartarian building had plumbing. They have no bathrooms, they have no running water. There's not even in Tartarian buildings anything that we can say was an inbuilt, designed-in food preparation area.
What's that about? Is that because we had different means of digestion or different means of attaining nutrition?
We have to assume something like that, or
right.
we could assume that these people were so keyed in that they did all of the body kind of stuff outside of the buildings, okay, and some other structure that did not survive. We do know that the buildings themselves factually had no plumbing going into them. There's no running water. There's no sign that it was ever there other than those buildings that had been taken over by modern humans where they did plumb them and stuff, right? There was also no active heating source, but there was clearly electricity all throughout the whole building. And there was no wiring or anything through it. And we have drawings and etchings where there are people that were playing with electricity. So the Tartarians would go out into these large fields and they had things that we would consider to be frisbees that floated and moved because of the static electricity in the air and stuff. Right. And you would play some games this way. And we have also them dueling with swords that were shedding electricity. So the way our kids have lightsabers and they bash around with those, they had adults in Tartaria land that had organized competitions of people that were fencing with swords that were electrified, and clearly the whole area is electrified. So we can speculate all different kinds of things, but we know that they had no plumbing, they had no food preparation areas. So either they did that outside of these magnificent buildings, or it was a case that they didn't need to do that. Okay, so maybe they were running on this different kind of body in the sense of were dealing with electricity generally. Okay, and so this also gets into all kinds of speculations, because Tartaria may have been existent back in the gold and silver age behind us. So 12 to 26,000 years back, right? And maybe in those times where we're getting so much energy out of galactic center, we don't need to eat. Right. It may very well affect us, right? So we just don't know. But we do factually know that there's all these buildings, potentially, we know hundreds of thousands, millions of these buildings were destroyed. And that's right. What World War II was about. And that's what a lot of this stuff was about. I saw remnants of these buildings in Europe in 1960s that were in the process of being pulled down then. Okay, I won't go into it, but we actually, as kids, we played in a couple of Tartarian buildings in southern Germany, in the ruins of the displaced persons period, before they'd really started repairing all of the infrastructure and stuff. And they were entirely unlike anything we have now. And their fireplaces had never, ever been used for a fire. But they were clearly a fireplace that channeled air up, but it may have done more than that, and it may also have been channeling electricity down and forming these loops and so on, because these buildings were fantastically well ventilated. And when you go into one of them, as a human, even though there might not have been people in there for years or any quantity of people in there for years, you are struck by this smell. It is as though you are standing on top of a mountain in Switzerland, pulling in that great clean air, okay? And this was in what should have been an old dusty brick building, but it was like really fantastic multicolored bricks that, different layers and all of the kind of stuff that we don't do now. But in any event, though, so we may have had a different kind of humanity then, okay? I know that it was different in many respects mentally. So now imagine the situation where you're a space alien, you encounter humanity, you muck about with us and do some GMO stuff, but you recognize that you're able to do this to these beings only because they are occluded at that period of time by not getting emanations from galactic center. They're in the dark zone, okay? And that's actually how it was discussed in these Sanskrit things, the dark time, the night time of humanity. Okay, where we were not getting the emanations. And so the Sanskrit writers, they had lived through periods where that was not the case. And some of the writings we've been able to get, and there's so few and far between that are let out into the West, and I'll get into that in a second, but some of the writings we've been able to get at are by people that knew they were in a time of decline mentally. They knew that they were living in the last Bronze Age. They were about 7,000 to 8,000 years back, and they knew people were becoming more stupid with every generation. And it had nothing to do with what they were doing. It had nothing to do with pollution. There was none of that. It was the emanations from galactic center being squeezed out, so to speak, by Earth coming into that obscuring mass. So galactic center truly is millions and millions and millions of suns all packed into this little tiny area. And then there's all of the planets out here for the whole galaxy out like that. And we're way the hell out here, and we go up and down relative to this obscuring mass. And when those space aliens came in, was in a period of the Kali Yuga, or before the Kali Yuga. It was in the descending Bronze Age and descending Silver Age, right? They conquered Earth, and then we became more and more and more and more stupid. Now we're up on the rising part of it out here, and we're getting more of these emanations from galactic center. So humans in general are becoming more intelligent. That's why, in my opinion, the globalists are working so hard to keep us non-spiritual, to pollute our bodies, and to affect our minds and make us think of the world in a grit mechanistic fashion, because they're trying to deny us awareness of this aspect of ourselves in our history in order that they might still keep control. That's failing. And I think it's failing so much that it's causing the Elohim who are still here, some of whom may be on the moon and some of whom may be in Antarctica. And I think it's causing them a great deal of problems and a whole lot of anxiety. And that anxiety is being picked up by the remote viewer guys. Okay.
And me, I feel it. Like
Yeah.
I accidentally tap into that stuff sometimes. I just wanted to share really quick because it lines up with everything you're saying. I've consistently pulled. I ask a very specific question of my tools, my cards, my higher self, whatever. What is it that humans have coming towards us in terms of change, in terms of these catalyst events that we don't see coming? And I'm talking specifically people like us that, you know, we make it our business to try to understand what's going to happen. And so it's kind of like, what's the big surprise? And
what are we missing? Yeah.
What are we missing? What are we not seeing? Because we're digging so hard. We're putting pieces together. What is this missing piece? Consistently, it's the sun. And I say that as the sun is glaring into my face. The sun moved over the duration of our time here. So I'm just, hopefully it's not distracting. I'm blind right now.
That's quite nice. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, it's the dark eyes, the melanin actually shields me pretty well. So I can look directly into it. I'm okay. The idea, the sun card in the tarot has a little bit less to do with the actual, celestial body or being or consciousness that is the sun, and more to do with how the effect that it has on human consciousness. And the idea is that within the solar plexus of every living human being, that remains untainted enough to bear this kind of symbiotic relationship to it, we will undergo what appears to be almost like a near-death experience. And so I dug into that a little bit, and apparently DMT is released inside the brain at the moment of death or in the event of a near-death experience. And so it really dawned on me that namely the West, because I'm very concerned about, I love this country. I feel like I was born to help the Western world, my people. And it's interesting, the idea that we need to undergo almost a collective near miss or a collective near-death experience. And I'm not suggesting that we're all going to just be flooded with DMT because that's how crazy things get. But I do feel that as a result of solar activity, whether that be central sun, sun in the sky, sun inside, I don't know, maybe all of them, the idea is that the sun is doing its work on us, even without our needing to sort of drag ourselves through it. So we're doing the work. We're trying to be good people. We're trying to detox our bodies, be healthy, be useful. But the sun is it has its own plan for us. And so I'd like to know your thoughts on the idea of a collective DMT or collective near-death experience and the implications of that on the Western world.
Okay, so this goes directly to the people that are trying to keep us down here in the Kali Yuga. Okay. So everything from officialdom is to try and keep us stupid so that they can control us. That can work for a period of time. So we know that the controllers use spirit cooking, right? They literally chop children up and use their blood and all of this kind of stuff, right? And they've been doing it forever. We also know that the 9/11 was a sacrificial ritual. Okay, people were killed quite deliberately in that period of time, and the spirit cookers of that time that were directing all of it were attempting to freeze time. Okay, to freeze time emotionally, and so that's really what humans are. Okay, we are not thinkers; we're the doers in the body. Our function as a doer in the body is to experience. And one of those major experiences, one of the things we do with experience is attach emotion to it. Okay, so you stub your toe, it's meaningless.
Mhm.
until you attach an emotion to it, and then it becomes pain, et cetera, right? And then it can affect your whole day, et cetera.
Mhm.
So all of our lives are simply to accumulate and experience emotion. We don't even really do anything with it. We're trying to integrate it as we can as doers in the body. But all of that's really done after we die, when our soul is reduced down to the iridescent drop of our intuition for our next life. And it's at that point that our thinker and our knower, our grander self, deals with integrating what we've learned, okay, what we've experienced. So we get into a period here where we're busting out of the ability of the controllers to keep us bound in the Kali Yuga. And so they've been using all of this magic to try and shoehorn us into this period of time in here and keep us in that mindset. One of the ways the universe will accommodate these kind of things is to allow them to do that. And you can say, well, why would universe do that? Well, because we must learn that experience of being controlled, that we might free ourselves.
Right.
Okay, that we might at least recognize that we are being freed, even if we're not doing it ourselves. And so this is all about our awareness in this period of time now. And what's happening is that the limit of their ability to use the black magic is entirely restricted into the Kali Yuga. It can't exist as a functional mechanism on either side of the Kali Yuga. This is necessary that the dark can have periods of power. Okay, so we live in a binary universe, and things must oscillate back and forth in order that there can be progression. And so at times the dark must dominate in order that the light could be pushed down, and then in being pushed down, have nothing else to look at but itself and its relationship with everything else, that it might arise again. So all of this stuff is all tied together. And so I expect all of the globalist plans that are already being disrupted by the Great Awakening, all of that to really continue and to seriously ramp up as we get to the point where we're dealing much more openly with the alien issue, the alien problem that we really have. And when we can do that, then we're also at that point, we're looking at the source of the controllers. Because that source is an idea. That source is the idea that somehow these people, the controllers, were chosen by God. And what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to stand up and say, no, you people are fucktards. You were chosen by a bunch of space aliens, and you're trying to convince us that those space aliens are the creator God, and that's horseshit.
Right.
Absolute horseshit. And we've got to face that. And we really have to face it both in ourselves. It's a hard thing to do. No one wants to be accused of being an anti-Semitic or being racist or any of that. There's all kinds of prohibitions built into our personalities to avoid that if at all possible. It's not a desirable goal to try and be an anti-Semite, right? And I'm not an anti-Semite, but I'm an anti-Selenite. So I'm against the L who are currently living in the moon or wherever the hell they are, right? I'm very much an anti-Elohim person, and I'm not anti-Jewish at all. I think Jews are very deluded, right? Along with the Christians and the Muslims and to a certain extent all of the other religions. And we need to get through that. This is our time. I don't know how we could characterize it, but your idea of DMT will certainly fit the experience of the normies, okay? It will be so outside their mental grasp that they may very well think they're on a psychedelic. This is this hyper novelty period, right? Now, will there be extra energies from galactic center impacting our thymus and our hypothalamus to actually produce more DMT into our pineal gland? That may very well happen. There's nothing that we can say now about any of these energies from galactic center because we're not in a period of time where we've got any written record of what happened in the past when we left that period, right? And we don't have any written record of having gone into the ascension the previous time, 26,000 years back or 12,000 years back. So saying that we're going to go through a collective DMT experience would not be out of line. I could not rule that out. I couldn't give it a probability. And if it is a collective DMT experience, then you can be quite certain that the level of DMT would be low.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be like, you wouldn't be like Joe Rogan. You wouldn't
Right,
be taking,
Joe Rogan, I'm blasting out.
right.
That's right.
Right, exactly. So it's not going to be that level, but it might be that there would be enough DMT being triggered within the normies that they may very much feel like they're on a trip with Joe Rogan.
Oh my God, I'm dying. It's like you're not dying, you're just waking up.
Right.
So I wanted
of course, you hit the right thing there too. One of the very first things with the DMT experience, whether you get it in mescaline or psilocybin or DMT directly, is the feeling of the body shattering, the feeling that you're right on that precipice of dying.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's terrifying. I wouldn't mess around with it. I love
it. I love it.
You do? See, I think it's a testament to your bravery. I've, used to do shrooms a few years ago, and I had a bad trip where I felt myself swing like a pendulum between collective doom and collective joy. And so within, several hours of that trip or that experience, I felt that my body on a cellular level was processing every terrible thing that's ever happened to anybody on the face of the earth. And then a few minutes later, every wonderful thing that's ever happened. And I said, that's enough for me. I don't want to do that again. Thank you for that. The golden teacher, the mushroom, certainly taught me what I needed to know. But the last thing here that I wanted to get your thoughts on, the idea of gold and silver. So my work with Bix, I never gave two craps about the financial system or the economy.
Right.
Now, I never cared. I've been relatively sheltered. I've been fortunate. I haven't had to worry about it. But then I became an adult, a big girl, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to pay bills. I have to understand how finances work. And I came to realize, oh my God, the current banking system is in fact a parasitic infrastructure, and it needn't be that way. And working with Bix Weir, I came into this wonderful relationship with silver, namely with silver, and studying, exploring silver, but almost its transcendental qualities. So certainly it is a wonderful form of tender and currency, but there's also its ability to almost on an energetic level, for lack of a better term, it can break through certain barriers. In essence, it can be seen or detected on different levels of existence. And I have my beautiful silver dagger here that Bix Weir made for me. When I tell you that this object it's like a multi-dimensional, like hyperdimensional object, and it can be seen and detected by spirit. I really do believe that. And so silver is something very special. I think gold is something very special as well. The moon rays charge the night sky or the night atmosphere, whatever hemisphere it's in, with these silver molecules. I don't know what you want to call it. Ions. Silver ions.
So you're correct about it affecting your spirit. Okay. So if we look at this, you can get ionized silver in various different forms, and you can ingest it. And it's an antibiotic, anti-cancer, antifungal. If you've got a fungus, you can put silver ionized silver water on you, and it heals your body. There is a biochemical reaction between the human body and silver. That reaction, which I don't want to go into the details there, get diverted, is different within the various different races at huge levels. Okay, but in general, all humans within a range will respond to silver. Okay, unlike gold. Gold is not that way at all. Okay, silver has two reactive isotopes, and gold has one. Okay, basically gold can be ionized and so forth, but in nature, gold is always stable and solid. When we go back and dig into our literature, we find out that the space aliens consume gold, that gold gets them off. It's a nootropic and a fantastic level to them. And that gold in the Ayurvedic tradition has been worked into several different medicines within Ayurveda for specific impact on the brain. So if you're a Hindu and you come up with MS or multiple dystrophy or any of the neurine diseases, you will be offered a chance to ingest gold as one of the components in a very specific calcinated kind of a way to cure you. And many of these people that are treated thus with gold do get cured. We also have gold being used for specific formulas that we've found in ancient Sanskrit, 3 of which were for the space aliens and were said not to be taken by humans because they were fatal. Okay. But that the space aliens demanded gold. Bear in mind, every single religion, all the gods want you to give them gold and flesh. Okay, wow. They want gold and flesh.
Greedy bastards.
Yeah, they're really scum, you know. But anyway, the gold, they formulated a special formula from which all Ayurveda gold processing for humans derive. So all of our use of gold as a neurine fixer, as a nootropic, all derived from this single formula that was given to us by the El. And the Devas actually in India, and they gave it to people to boost their ability to run the mind-machine interface. And the humans that got it reported fantastic effects, but it kills you young. It burns you out. Okay, so gold is not like silver. Okay, silver is supportive, it's life enhancing, it's longevity enhancing in humans, and silver bullets. Okay, silver is the negative thing for the El, for the Devas, for the Theoi, for all of the gods. They were desperate not to be struck by silver. That silver left a permanent impression on them. And in one of the Talmudic books, there's 63 of them. I can't remember which one it is. There was a commentary. It was like a brief, maybe 40 or 50 lines maximum. There were like 4 or 5 lines about a council meeting that El Elyon ran, in which Yahweh was the one of the council of gods who was not condemned to die as a mortal. Okay, so I won't go into that. But in any event, though, in that description in the commentary, they talk about a mechanism for determining if you were dealing with an El. Okay, so the El could take other shapes. They could mask your mind so you didn't see them as an 8-foot-high being that was an archangel. Instead, you saw them as a 5'4" withered old woman. And it didn't change. They weren't shape shifting. They were changing the perception in your mind through their telepathy, right? Yes. But there was this thing in there that only works if that person had no silver on them. Okay, so silver affected that. It was a test that you could use as a human to see if you were being dealt with by an El. They would not take a silver coin in the hand. So if you were in a transaction with the El, they would only be paid in gold. And there were humans that took and made gold and silver alloys, such that there was a slight preponderance of silver, but it still looked gold. And when those were put in the hands of the El, they burned and they left a permanent mark. And so you would know, and the El, of course, would freak out and probably kill you on the spot, because the archangels could just push through their mind, they could push a finger into your mind and just scramble your brain and you would die, right? Totally disrupt, not even have to physically touch you, and they could totally disrupt your mind to the point that your body would cease functioning as it should. And shortly thereafter, you would die. So the idea of a silver bullet, silver in vampires, silver in werewolves, all of that, right? Because the El would also frequently, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, project themselves into your mind as animals that you wouldn't mess with, you wouldn't want to deal with, right? Yeah. So if I were a space explorer and I wanted to go to a planet and explore, it would be very handy to me if that planet were populated for me to be able to control the minds of the populace there such that I could walk around and they would see me as something they wouldn't want to mess with, a bear or a wolf or whatever, right? And so that has happened repeatedly to humans throughout the Kali Yuga as we've had to deal with these space aliens, is that they're messing with our minds and our perceptions. And it was interesting to me to discover in there that silver was an antidote. And so we also have that, silver and antidote. Those words are hugely connected. Now, this is all coming up as the death of the fiat system is happening. This is all coming up as we've had a huge ramp up in UFO visits. Okay, even the military is now starting to freak out because there's so many UFOs showing up.
Good.
Um, Good. Exactly. It's like, hey, we're here.
Keep them on their toes.
Right, right. It's the party, right? Get your clothes ready. We're going to it. Um, and it's going to begin for us, I think, very early in next year.
Yes.
But most people won't be sensitive to it, and they won't feel it until we get into summer and we have the more blatant examples of this. So I'm expecting by summer, according to my data, that we might have not necessarily face-to-face, not necessarily landings, but like indisputable, observed on live TV kind of things of UFOs, that sort of a deal.
Well, and it's fascinating. And I was mentioning, this visitation, and this is all happening essentially in my head. So I can't say, oh, this happened in 3D. It didn't. It happened in my mind. But they were military personnel, and I couldn't tell you what branch. Okay, their uniforms, their insignia. It wasn't something I could recognize, although I could draw it for you. But they told me that there were machines in the sky that soon they were breaking down, and that the true sky, so the mechanisms in the sky were hiding what they called the true sky, but that the true sky over the course of the next few years was going to start reflecting, sort of penetrating the mechanisms to where those mechanisms, whether they were smoke screens or whatever is in the atmosphere that is blocking our ability to perceive, maybe not even with the eyes, but on a multidimensional level, our ability to perceive it has been blocked by these mechanisms. Those mechanisms were, for all intents and purposes, being broken down, possibly by shelf life. I don't know what exactly, lack of maintenance, whatever the case may be, but that the waters beneath our feet and the waters in the true sky were able to penetrate those mechanisms and meet each other. And because us as human beings are walking around on the surface, and because we are made up of so much water, that was inevitably, there was no escaping how those waters were going to affect us and our perception. And so I totally think, over the next couple of years, UFO activity, water is going to start behaving very, very strangely in the atmosphere. And I wanted to ask you, with the silver and the gold, because like everybody that I talk to, my subscribers, people that I work with, everybody's wanting to know what's going on with the fiat system, because obviously without money, we can't feed our children. We die. You know what I mean? At least in the way the current system is set up, everybody needs to pay their bills and afford food. But the idea is, if human beings were to have a visceral understanding of what silver is, what gold is, and we would then be able to understand what a gold-backed system, financial system, the implications of that, it really implies a healthy financial ecosystem where we actually have a much deeper relationship with our money system than we ever thought. It does not have to be this parasitic infrastructure with dead, useless fiat currency. So silver and gold backed currency, is that something that you see being established?
No, so it will arise, but it won't be established. Okay, established is a word that implies there's an authority that puts it in place.
You're right. Good point.
We got to be very careful about these words as we go forward, because we've never been here, right? In our experience,
established. Right? No more established.
Right. It's like Jordan Peterson. I like Jordan Peterson, but the way he named his organization tells me it's doomed to defeat. Okay, because it's an association for responsible citizenship. Okay, citizenship implies authority, responsibility implies authority that makes the decision, et cetera, et cetera. And an association is a group that is separated from the rest of the officialdom in its association. So it's so we have to be careful about this. But yes, okay. So here's the thing. In my opinion, we're going to go through a fiat crash. In my opinion, the fiat system won't be replaced by another system. Now, they will try. There's no question about that. They're going to seriously try the CBDC. That's their only last gasp. Okay, the controllers cannot go to a circulating metals economy. Okay, so I suspect that there won't be a gold-backed anything. Okay, because that implies an authority to issue the gold to back whatever fiat, whatever currency you're using. There may well be something in which we have a gold convertible um, money, for lack of a better word. Okay, that so we may indeed find that we attach gold to blockchain. All right, not quantum computing, none of that horse shit that these people are putting out there. The quantum financial system is, again, would be a CBDC backed by central banks that is imposed on the people. So the quantum financial system, in my opinion, is, it's something you want to puke out. You want to get rid of it as soon as you possibly can. But we will get to a situation where humans naturally have to do trading. So you'll discover when the fiat crashes, no, you don't have to pay bills. The only thing you have to do is to be able to trade for food and water and those supplies you need. Okay, that trading does not necessarily imply paying any debts or any of that. When the fiat dies, so does all the debt. All right, so when the fiat dies, all the mortgages go away. There's nobody to collect them. You wouldn't pay rent or whatever, right? Someone may nominally own a house now that they're renting out, but do they own that house? No, they own the debt that's attached to that property. So things will radically change, and in ways that will distress all kinds of individuals that are tied to the old system. And we will evolve this over a number of years, and we may actually get to the point where we have circulating, I suspect that'll actually come out fairly quick, where we have circulating silver and gold as a method of trading between ourselves that has nothing to do with any kind of a system that's ruled or controlled by anyone. And actually, and actually, when we have circulating metals and cryptos, okay, because in that sense, cryptos would be gold. They would be able to circulate and do the job because you would have an attachment that you could take this Bitcoin and you could go trade it for food somewhere, right? And because people do want that because it's so convenient. They don't have to have these big lumps of gold. I'll tell you about that in a second too. But anyway, I suspect we will build out our own system based on circulating metals. And I also suspect that we'll see a mining boom, that vast quantities of people will just say, fuck the federal government, and they will descend on the Grand Canyon. And
there we go. Oh,
they'll just start digging and digging in Shasta Mountain and going to Alaska and going over here to St. Helens. When St. Helens blew, it polluted a lot of the streams around here with gold. Wow. And there have been 400 earthquakes recently in Mount St. Helens, so it's still active, but there's not much of a reservoir underneath it to explode, right? Because it's not capped by a big mountain. But nonetheless, when it did blow, it affected all the streams around in the area. And I know people that are out there getting flake now and occasional nuggets. So it will happen that people will be out all over doing this as a natural response to their own personal situations. And that's happening now. It's going to get huge. It's going to get to the point where it starts becoming a social thing. And you'll see, in my opinion, maybe it'll be April. It'll certainly be in spring, okay? Because winter is going to be too tough for a lot of these people. But you'll see on social media, people that are planning to get together to do digging expeditions. Yep. Okay, so you'll start seeing people start coordinating, saying, hey, I got to do something. I had to leave my government job because it only paid me, $30,000 a year, and my rent is now $30,000 a month, right? So fuck all of that. I need to do something. And a bunch of guys will say, they'll get the wild ass idea and they'll say, okay, let's get enough money for gas and let's all go out to Nevada and dig gold. Okay, in my family, when my grandfather. My grandfather's people, so my mother was born on the side of the Sacramento River, okay? Her mother died within 8 days of her being born. This was back in the 1930s. And she was left with relatives, with her two siblings, while her father came up to Washington State to mine gold. Okay, wow. just to survive. He got back 2 years later in 1932, basically the height of the Depression really hitting, and he had enough gold to buy a small mountain in Southern California. It was a terrible mountain. You couldn't do much on it. You had a little garden, that kind of thing. And so they lived in this small mountain, in Northern California, actually. Calaveras County up, the Jumping Frog Jubilee, that kind of thing, right? Anyway, though, on that mountain, they also found gold. And so my family's history has been tied to gold mining. But we will find that in this future generation that there's going to be a lot of people that are going to have those same kind of stories of their parents, their grandparents going under these desperate circumstances and finding metal. And silver is going to just be fantastically expensive or valuable, however you want to think about it. Much more so than gold because of a lot of different reasons. But
well,
anyway.
and Bix has asked me, because you guys know I'm Bix's resident reader, and I would never have delved into matters of silver and gold had it not been for the synchronistic, the threads that pull us all together, and my work with him and my work with you as well. And it's like silver, I've seen where people in the future and in the near future are actually, they're like, we love this house. And, say that person had 4 houses, 5 houses. And, a family is like, I will exchange all of this gold, all of this silver in exchange for this house. And there's no paperwork. There's no, it's not like that. It's
no taxes. Yep.
No taxes, none of that. And, at the time I was like, what is this? I'm viewing, because the tarot cards tell a story. So that's kind of that's my web bot, if you will, is the arcanum. And that's what it appeared to be, is that people were reclaiming their power. They had sort of almost through experience, through hardship, through victory, reclaimed their history with these metals. And it was a piece of history that has been lost from us, like how close we are with silver and gold. And Bix did ask me once about the ratio of value between silver and gold. And the cards implied that they were actually, because as of right now, if you look at the market value of silver and gold wildly outvalued.
80 or 90 times or whatever. Yeah.
And yet the cards implied that the true value was like neck and neck, almost as if they have an alchemical marriage to one another, like a husband and a wife. And, there was a lot more of a similarity there, if you will. But silver has always just absolutely glowed in terms of its problem-solving ability in the future of this country. So no gold-backed established system, because we're trying to do away with establishment. That makes a lot of sense. That is the goal, certainly.
Well, probably also we will evolve into a digital form of gold, okay? Gold tied to a blockchain. There's no question about that, because blockchain is so solid and usable. And we'll have to evolve into it, because otherwise it's an imposition from some authority, right? But I think we're going to see that silver is going to be really valuable, not only in electronics, but in, I just hate to get into it because there's so many scammers out there with it now, but into the quote med beds, all right? So silver is bioreactive with humans, where gold is not. Gold is inert. So you can poison yourself with silver fairly easily. You can poison yourself much more easily with gold. There's an interesting aspect of silver, though, relative to silver in the body and electrics, okay, electric fields. And so it would not surprise me to see in the near future that we use a silver solution, and this is in my data, okay, it's not described this way, but I'm applying some analysis to it, but a silver solution that you would drink, and then you would go and expose yourself to directed forms of electric energy, to a directed form of an electromagnetic field, such that the silver could be targeted. So silver has a huge anti-cancer things on certain kinds of systemic, so brain cancers, nerve cancers, glandular cancers, especially the saliva and all of the immune affecting glands could be, yeah, exactly, thyroid, pituitary, all of these, right? They could be targeted relatively easily with silver in solution if you had some way of moving this and directing that within the body. The reason that you would want to do that is that there's an interesting aspect of these kind of cancers, and that is that the silver ion actually touching the cancerous cell kills the cancerous cell. So if you have like heart cancer, and there's like 2 or 3 other kinds. I think pancreatic cancer, and I forget the other one. It's not liver, but there's 3 kinds of cancers that if a molecule from a cayenne pepper touches that cancer cell, it kills the cancer cell. Okay, so there's all these very specific kinds of things that, if exposed to the cancer cell itself, causes that cancer cell to die and not replicate, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm of the opinion that our med beds are going to be initially this process whereby you would drink this silver solution, which is perfectly fine, not going to poison you or anything. And then, because of the nature of silver and bioelectricity, they'll use a device of some form that would give a specific frequency that would move it to a tumor in your brain, right? That kind of thing. And then it would erode the tumor in the brain from the inside. There are things that do that now. So I had a specific kind of skin cancer, huge, size of the palm of my hand. And it was identified in like 2012 or something like that. I didn't want to mess around with the oncologist. They were all hot to cut it out. I'd had an appointment to go scheduled 2 weeks later after it was diagnosed to go and get a huge chunk of my scalp cut off. And I applied Curaderm, which is this product that was used, developed for cows and cancer in Australia because of the sunlight and all of the tumors that they develop. And you put this stuff on the tumor and it falls off. And it killed the cancer cells. It stung where it touched cancer cells, but did not in any way react with healthy skin. And so my skin sort of collapsed a little bit as the cancer cells underneath it died, and then it came back. And the doctors were pissed because they couldn't cut it out. There was nothing going on, and I just walked out after that thing. But so I've had that experience of it collapsing out from the inside. And then your body has to deal with it, has to shed all of it. You know, it's like it's toxic and so on. We're going to get to that real quick in this new year. It's not going to be med beds. It's not going to be this, Charlie Ward hokum that they're putting out with the QFS and all this other bullshit. But we are starting to get to energetic ways of dealing with our bodies. And that's all tied in with the controllers and the globalists and what they want to achieve. They're in a world of hurt because they know where we're at relative to the galactic emanations. They can anticipate certain things that are coming and are reacting to that. So you know the movie John Wick?
I do.
Okay. He never uses specie. He never uses dollars, right? Whenever he buys in those movies, whenever he buys anything or deals in any way at an economic level with anybody, it's gold coins. Right?
Remember right there. That's wild. I didn't even notice that. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so all he does is pay in a stack of gold coins. There is actually a functioning economy that is handled now on stacks of gold coins. It's pretty much global. The government think of it as money laundering and all of this kind of stuff because it's non-traceable. You can just get shit done, right? And I've been approached by somebody that offered me a pretty sizable stack of gold coins to the point that I was tempted, okay, to just consider having someone give me 50 to 100 gold coins to do a run for them. Okay, and so, we're talking some serious money at $2,000 per gold coin, right? $100,000 to $200,000. And I declined because of my personal circumstances, and it would have been too much of a burden for me. It would have taken me many months to try and achieve what they were after, and even then it was questionable. But it was fascinating to discuss this with this group of people that had those coins that was willing to pay it for this particular kind of a run. And I've directed them elsewhere, so I think that they will be satisfied in dealing with these other people and getting what they want out of it. But in talking with them, I realized that these people that is their method of operation all the time. That They have cards and then they carry gold coins, but they don't carry paper in any way and deal with it at all. They've just opted out. And we're going to get into that for all of us. And you'll see how really nice it is. It's the opposite of the CBDC because there won't be anybody to track you, right? Once you've changed the coins, there's no drawing it back or any of that. The deal's done. And it's a kind of a finality that I think we need, that we're lacking with this the weird system that they've evolved around us to try and control us. And it's dying now, but it's good. And this is why I keep saying hyper novelty, because all of these people, including ourselves, as you say, there's stuff we're missing, right? Because it's intended that we should miss it. And all of that ability to occlude everything is going to die. And we're going to be in this period of hyper novelty where newness is just jumping out at us from every single spot because nothing is controlled anymore. And we can't even imagine that.
The prospect of it is just, it creates such a sense of optimism and hope, which I happen to think is actually a very powerful emanation. There's nothing wrong with being optimistic. There's nothing wrong with holding on to the idea of hope. This is far from over, folks. You know, a lot of people I talk to, they're very, very down right now, Cliff. They're terrified. They're afraid of things like domestic terrorism. They're afraid of, you know, they're poisoning the air, the water, everything is poison.
Sure, the food, all of that. They're a bunch of rotten bastards. We're under continual attack 24/7. Isn't it glorious? We had to go through this. We had to experience this. We had to show ourselves that we're warriors and that we're going to overcome, right? And there's a lot of people that are down and all of that. I understand that. That's because they had to experience it this way, you know? So this is one of those things where, you know, I run across these people all the time. It's like, hey, guy, I'm glad you're really suffering because you're going to come out of it and you'll feel so much better in a few minutes, you know, or a few days or whatever, right? But basically, the only thing we can do is to maintain our optimism and keep on keeping on, and then eventually turn around and look behind us, and you'll see quite a crowd.
Oh, yeah. And it does often feel that way. It looks that way in my cards. You know, when I try to utilize my tools to foresee the future or you know, most likely outcomes, it always appears to be that we collectively have this sigh of it's relief, but it's also in a lot of ways it's disbelief, because we're like, we came so close to almost missing our exit in a lot of ways, because that's how powerful the campaign was against us. And we will lose a lot of people. We've already lost a lot of people. So, you know, a lot of people have, in some ways, we've lost many, many battles. And yet I do feel that we are on our way to winning this war, and it's actually inevitable in a lot of ways. But Cliff,
I agree. It was inevitable. It had to happen this way. We had to suffer. One thing that people don't recognize is that as you graduate out of normie-dom, right, as you evolve, as you become more aware, one thing that is always going to happen is that your ability to appreciate your own suffering will escalate. Your ability to be aware of your own suffering will escalate. And thus, you will become aware of the suffering of others as well. Okay, so once you get to the idea that my evolution is always going to involve my own pain and suffering, and it can be no other way, that makes you one tough son of a bitch. There's nothing that anybody can do to me except destroy my body. And that doesn't even kill me. It just destroys my body. I go on.
Understood. There's a Native American proverb I just stumbled upon. I can't believe I went my whole life without hearing it. But it said, tell me something and I may forget. Show me something and I may not remember. But involve me and I will understand. And that really sums up everything we're going through. We can't, you know, you can't show a people, a population. You can't tell people. You can't been jumping up and down for years, you know. You have to walk the path, the trial by fire, the suffering. And you realize if it doesn't.
So you're right there, because there's only one way to get that instruction from that golden teacher. You've got to eat it.
Right.
And you can say, and then at that point you can say, I've learned and I'm done. I don't need it anymore. Right. Now me, you know, I'm an explorer. So in the future, what's that?
You still enjoy the occasional golden teacher?
No, I don't at this stage, because I have so many responsibilities, because my wife is disabled and there's all this stuff. Right. And quite factually, I've learned everything I can from psilocybin. But also quite factually, I left mescaline too early. There's still stuff to learn there. And so maybe in the future, maybe when I'm 80, I'll start voyaging again. I just don't know.
You know, Cliff, sometimes I just have to pinch myself, like our over the duration of our email correspondences, I'll put my phone down. I have to pinch myself because I really can't even tell you. 19 years old, and I never would have dreamed that I would get you to entertain me, humor me for an hour and a half, and I would get to talk to you in person. I'm 34 years old, so 18, 19 feels like a literal lifetime away. And I still just am in disbelief that I manifested my ability to talk to you. So I am just so grateful that you're here. I am beyond ecstatic that you still have the ability to share your work and communicate these important things with people, because we need it so much right now. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for everything that you've done for us and for me as well. You've made my whole, we'll call it, the back end of 2023. This is like the highlight of the second half of my 2023, and I'm so excited to share this with my people. And is there anything else you would like to say in closing here? Because I could talk to you for a year.
No, I have. It's cold as hell out here, and I got to go get some new coffee too. And I'm going to be making some bread. A couple of things. All humans, when faced with stress, will have a body reaction. That body reaction will be this clamping effect on your lungs. So if there's one thing you can always do, you can learn, like the Zen people, like the martial artists, to breathe. When you feel yourself getting tense, deliberately take control of your lungs and inhale and exhale and breathe out that tension. Okay, so there will be lots of opportunity for people to tell the normies, hold still, just breathe. Just breathe, concentrate on your breathing. And this will be for next year. And then the real kicker here, and I'm going to sign off, is I appreciate what you're saying, and I get the emotion, but you just wait until you start shaking Trump's hand.
Oh, don't say, oh my God, I just got full body chills. That's incredible. I was just thinking about General Patton. General Patton said, brain power comes from the lungs. He said, brain power comes from the lungs. You cannot have a clear thought he was actually kind of a jerk. I love him. He's the best, but he was rough around the edges, and he hated fat people. He hated morbidly obese people. He was like, you cannot have properly functioning brain power
unless you take care of your body. No, that's a stoic. He's a stoic. You gotta go back to the core and work your way out, so to speak. Yeah. But I'm not kidding you about Trump.
I'm taking that.
I'm not going to give you any details, but I'm not kidding you.
I'm claiming that one, Cliff. Thank you so much. I hope to get you back on here again, maybe in the future, 6 months.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, everybody have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thanks so much. God bless.